Do you ever wonder why poverty exists? Why in one of the richest countries in the world, we have people who cannot afford food or shelter? Why we can't provide health care and mental health services for everyone? Why college is unaffordable? And why our energy systems pollute and destroy our planet? None of these things are genetic. They are not hereditary. They are not inevitable. They are interconnected. And they are all created by public policy. Because they are all created by public policy, that means we can change everything. We can create a sustainable economy powered by renewable energy, and we can slow the impact of global climate change. How do we evolve to provide for our inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? This great experiment of ours is based upon the role of the individual, the idea that we are all created equal, and that means we are all accountable. And in order for democracy to work, we must all participate. I'm going to ask you to join me in a thought experiment on how we have this level of societal progress to achieve our goals. We start with the premise and the power of change. We have to believe in our power to create change. And I would suggest in our system of government, we might have to believe that 5 is greater than 218. How is that possible? It is actually a mathematical koan. In Zen Buddhism, a koan is used to demonstrate the lack and inadequacy of logical reasoning and provoke enlightenment. And that is the goal, to provoke enlightenment. Let's start by imagining we change Friday night lights to enlightened Friday nights. We energize our policies and our government. We make sure our children and our politics get more sunshine. How do we do it? How do we get there? For me, this started in the summer of 2011, when I received an email from Bill McKibben, founder of the global climate change organization 350.org. The email said, "Dear Lisa, would you join me in Washington, D.C. and get arrested at the White House?" I'd been waiting my whole life for someone to ask me that question. And so over the next few months, I prepared for my arrest. And on September 3rd, 2011, I traveled to Washington, and I was part of the 2-week-long tar sands action. Over 1,200 activists were arrested. At the time, it was the largest act of civil disobedience since the civil rights movement. And it changed my life. I remember that day it was raining as we walked out of Lafayette Park and crossed the street to the White House. I started to get a little bit afraid. I knew that just the act of sitting down in front of the White House meant we could all be arrested. When we sat down, I started to feel even more afraid, and I started to cry. But we sang, we chanted, and when it was my turn to be arrested, I stood up and I put my hands behind my back, and I turned around to get handcuffed, and suddenly I felt lighter, happy even. I had this epiphany, and I'm told that when I turned around, I had this big smile on my face. You see, I had realized that getting arrested was a profound form of activism, but what I really needed to do was get elected. And so after I paid my bail, I went home, and I started to think about the change I wanted to create in the world. I thought about the state of our politics, and I thought about how policy becomes legislation. You see, at this time, I was working with Obama for America on the Affordable Care Act. I was one of hundreds of volunteers, and we were seeing just how difficult it was to get anything through Congress, where we needed 218 votes to pass policy. And so we continued to work on how we could get this done. And I started to think about the math and the dynamics of policy change. And it was that math that helped me decide what office I should run for. I decided to run for school board. I came home and started attending those school board meetings. There were monthly committee meetings on policy, finance, curriculum, and building and grounds. At one of those meetings, the board was discussing with the administration a construction project for a new school. They had promised this project was going to be done with sustainable practices and include renewable energy. But at that meeting, one of the men in the room said, well, now that we're going to reject geothermal because it's too expensive, we can just move on. And I thought, hang on, wait a minute. Wasn't this the policy we were fighting to change? Wasn't this why we had been arrested? How was it possible our tax dollars were going to be used to install a system that was going to pollute and destroy our planet? It went against all of our values. And so I challenged that statement. I asked to see the cost-benefit analysis that proved geothermal was too expensive. Imagine my shock when they told me they didn't do any analysis. They just knew geothermal was going to be too expensive. What they didn't know was that in addition to being an activist, I'm an accountant. Math and numbers matter. And something in that statement simply did not add up. And so over the next 18 months, I started to do research. I filed a right to know request. I had to read hundreds of documents and emails, research everything from the cost of natural gas to the energy usage of geothermal energy systems. I did not start out as an expert in geothermal, but I became one over the next 18 months. Finally, it was time for the vote. We presented our cost-benefit analysis that showed that not only was geothermal more energy efficient, it was more fiscally responsible. We brought in experts, and the board even held a special public hearing. Many members of our community spoke, including a 9-year-old student who spoke passionately about the need for clean energy. Before the roll call, one of the board members said he wanted to make a statement. He started out by saying, in the beginning, I thought Lisa was crazy. But I looked at her analysis, and I asked 3 engineers to also review it, and all of them agreed. Those numbers are right. And in that moment, I felt like we were going to win. We were going to get that approval. But we did not get 5 votes that night. We got 6. And so the geothermal system now operates in 2 schools, and it saves taxpayers over $100,000 a year every year based upon current cost estimates. Given the current market conditions, those savings will only grow every year. It takes just 5 members of our community, 5 of our neighbors, 5 advocates for public health and safety to create the change we want to see in the world. You see, part of my epiphany when I got arrested was that in the United States House of Representatives, it takes 218 votes to pass anything. In the United States Senate, we need 51 or even 60 votes, depending upon how obstructionist the Senate is feeling that day. In state legislatures, the number of votes we need varies, but in every single one of them, it is more than 5. But your local school board is the governing body that has the most impact on your daily life. In most areas, your school district is the largest employer, the largest purchaser of energy, food, and supplies, They are one of the largest property owners, and they run the largest construction projects. And we can change all the policies locally with just 5 votes. So that means we can retrofit our schools to renewable energy. We can create jobs, decrease costs, save tax dollars, balance budgets, and create a non-tax revenue stream for our public schools. Think about that, non-tax revenue. That's huge. And we can do all that with 5 votes. So this journey of mine that started on that rainy day in 2011, it took me through many travels and protests. And I've made so many friends, and we had a lot of fun doing it. I even got arrested with Jane Fonda's grandchildren, but that's a whole nother story. But it brought me to that realization that 5 is greater than 218. We can change the world. We can have fun while doing it. To get started, I just need you to all believe that 5 is greater than 218. Thank you.